The room went silent. No guitar, no applause, no laughter to hide behind. In a world that expected legends to be untouchable, Freddie Mercury did something that shocked everyone. He spoke the truth about his heart. What he said next would ripple through the crowd, the press, and the world of music, not as scandal, but as courage. Some fans cried. Some froze. Some finally felt seen for the first time in their lives. But no one was prepared for the emotional chain of events that followed. Before this story ends, you'll discover why Freddie chose that exact moment, what the audience did that stunned him, and how this confession changed not only his career, but thousands of lives in the crowd. This is not a story about controversy. It's a story about honesty, bravery, and what happens when a legend chooses. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional stories about Freddie Mercury. The stage lights burned hotter than usual. Freddie Mercury stood alone at the center of the platform, the roar of the crowd vibrating through his bones. Thousands of faces stretched into the darkness, a living ocean of sound and motion. The band had just finished the final note of the song, and the stadium was exploding with applause. Normally, this was a moment when Freddie thrived, when he fed on the energy, commanded the space, owned every heartbeat of the night. But tonight, something inside him refused to perform. His chest felt tight, not from exhaustion, but from anticipation. He knew what he was about to do. For weeks, the words had followed him, backstage, into hotel rooms, through the silence after shows. He had rehearsed them 1,000 times in his mind, always stopping before the final step. Not tonight. Freddie raised his hand. The band quieted. The crowd slowly followed. A hush rolled across the stadium, heavy and electric. Freddie scanned the sea of faces, fans young and old, some holding signs, some crying, some smiling, some trembling with excitement. He had given them music, spectacle, dreams. Now he would give them something else. His voice came out softer than usual. "Can I speak to you just as a man?" A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Freddie Mercury rarely broke the illusion. "I've spent my life singing about love," he continued, "but I've never spoken about it honestly." He paused, letting the moment breathe. Somewhere near the front row, a fan whispered his name. Freddie swallowed. "I don't want to hide anymore." The sentence fell into the stadium like thunder without sound. He felt the weight of every expectation pressing against him. The press, the industry, the world that preferred legends untouched by truth. His hands trembled slightly, but he did not pull them away from the microphone. "I love a man." For a fraction of a second, the world stopped. No cheers, no boos, no movement, just stillness. Freddie stood there, heart pounding, exposed beneath the lights. Then the first sound broke the silence. A scream, not of anger, but of emotion. Then another. Then applause. Not polite, not cautious. Explosive. Some fans cried openly. Others raised their hands, shouting his name. Some stood frozen, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. A few shook their heads in disbelief, not rejection, but shock at the courage of it. Freddie felt his knees weaken. He had expected many things. This was not one of them. He placed a hand over his heart, steadying himself. "I didn't say this because it's easy," he continued. "I said it because it's true." The crowd surged again, louder now. In the front row, a young man covered his mouth, tears streaming freely. Beside him, his partner grabbed his hand, both of them shaking with emotion. Freddie saw them. He saw dozens of faces like theirs. For the first time, the stadium was not just a crowd. It was a mirror. "I've been afraid," Freddie admitted. "Afraid of losing you. Afraid of being misunderstood. Afraid of being alone." His voice cracked. But love is not something to be ashamed of. The audience roared. Somewhere in the upper seats, a woman held up a sign. "We love you, Freddie." The words blurred in his vision. The band remained silent behind him, instruments lowered, giving him the space he needed. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," Freddie said. "I don't know how the world will respond. But I know this." He took a breath. "Tonight I am free." The sound that followed was overwhelming. Freddie stepped back from the microphone, overwhelmed by the emotion flooding through him. For years, he had carried the weight of that truth alone. Now he was not alone. But not every face in the crowd looked the same. Farther back, a few fans stood stiff, uncertain. A handful turned to each other, whispering urgently. Some crossed their arms, their expressions unreadable. Freddie noticed. Freedom always has a cost. He nodded slowly, acknowledging both love and confusion in the crowd. Then he lifted the microphone again. "This next song," he said quietly, "is for anyone who's ever been afraid to be themselves." The band began to play. The music rose, familiar, powerful, transformed by what had just happened. Freddie sang differently now, not louder, but truer. Each note carried the weight of confession, of release, of connection. The crowd sang with him, not as spectators, as witnesses. When the song ended, the stadium was in tears and thunder. Backstage, moments later, Freddie leaned against the wall, breath shallow, hand shaking. Brian stood beside him, eyes glassy. "You did it," Brian whispered. Freddie nodded, still processing the reality of what he had done. "I don't know what comes next," Freddie said. Brian placed a hand on his shoulder. "But you changed something tonight." Freddie closed his eyes. He felt lighter, terrified, alive, and he had no idea that the reaction he had just witnessed was only the beginning, because the world outside the stadium, the media, the industry, the people who would build his legend, would respond in ways no one could have predicted. Some would stand with him. Some would turn away. And the choices Freddie Mercury would make next would test his courage far beyond the stage. The stadium lights faded, but the moment refused to die. Freddie Mercury walked down the narrow hallway backstage with the echo of the crowd still ringing in his ears. Crew members stopped him, some speechless, some smiling, some simply staring as if they had just witnessed history without knowing what to do with it. The dressing room door closed behind him, sealing him into silence. Only then did his knees finally weaken. He sank onto the couch, breathing hard, palms pressed his thighs. The confession still vibrated through him, not as fear, but as something closer to relief mixed with awe. For the first time in his life, Freddie had not performed. He had revealed. A knock came softly at the door. Brian entered first, then Roger, then John. None of them spoke at first. They didn't need to. Roger finally broke the silence. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Freddie nodded slowly. "Yes." Brian stepped closer. "You were brilliant. Not as a singer, as a human." Before Freddie could answer, the tour manager burst in, pale, holding a stack of notes. "Phones are going insane," he said. "Press wants statements. Radio stations want confirmation. Promoters are asking what this means for the tour." Freddie stood. "It means I told the truth." The manager hesitated. "Freddie, the world is not always kind to the truth." Freddie met his eyes, then let the world learn. Outside the building, the crowd still hadn't left. Hundreds remained, crying, hugging strangers, holding signs in the air. One young man sat on the curb, hands shaking, telling a reporter, "I thought I was the only one. I thought someone like him could never be like me." Another woman whispered into a microphone, "He saved my son tonight." But not all reactions were gentle. Some fans argued heatedly. Some turned away in silence. Some wrote furious headlines before the night was over. The next morning, every newspaper carried his words. "Freddie Mercury, I love a man." Some articles praised his bravery. Others questioned his career. A few mocked him cruelly. Freddie read none of them. He sat in a hotel room, curtains open, watching the city move as if nothing had changed. Inside him, everything had. A knock. The hotel concierge handed him a stack of letters. Handwritten. Dozens. Hundreds. Freddie opened the first. "Because of you, I told my parents the truth." Another. "I didn't think I would live to see someone like you say those words." Another. "Thank you for choosing love." His chest tightened. By afternoon, phone calls poured in, friends, collaborators, strangers, people from his past. Some cried. Some thanked him. Some said nothing. Just breathe on the other end of the line. One call came late in the evening. A familiar voice. "Freddie," the man said quietly. "Are you all right?" Freddie recognized it instantly. The man he loved. "Yes," Freddie answered. For the first time, silence stretched between them. "You were very brave," the man said. Freddie closed his eyes. "I was very tired of hiding." That night, Freddie lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought of the crowd, the faces, the fear, the freedom, and then the doubt crept in. What would this cost him? Contract would change. Some fans would leave. The world would try to place him inside a new box. For the first time, the future did not feel secure, but it felt honest. The following show arrived faster than he expected. Freddie stood behind the curtain, listening to the crowd. The noise was loud, but different. Anticipation mixed with uncertainty. The band gathered around him. "You ready?" Roger asked. Freddie nodded. He stepped onto the stage. The reaction was thunderous. Some cheered louder than ever. Some remained cautious. Some held signs that read, "We stand with you." Freddie felt tears sting his eyes. He walked to the microphone, heart racing. For a moment, he wondered if he would regret everything. Then he remembered the letters. The young man on the curb. The first scream of support in the silence. He lifted the microphone. And in that moment, Freddie Mercury knew something no critic, no headline, no contract could ever take from him. He had changed lives. And the world's response was only beginning. Because soon a powerful decision would be placed in front of him. One that would force him to choose between safety and truth, between legacy and love. And the choice Freddie would make would define the rest of his life. The room was full, but Freddie Mercury felt alone. Executives sat around the long conference table. Papers spread before them like weapons carefully arranged. The air smelled of coffee, ink, and quiet tension. Outside the window, London moved on with its ordinary rhythm, unaware that a battle was unfolding behind closed doors. Freddie stood near the far end of the table, arms folded loosely, posture calm, expression unreadable. One of the executives cleared his throat. "We need to talk about the future." Freddie nodded. "I agree. You made a statement." Another said carefully, "A very public one." Freddie's voice was steady. "I spoke the truth." The man leaned forward. "The truth has consequences." Freddie met his gaze. "So does lying." Silence followed. They showed him numbers. Ticket projections. Sponsorship concerns. Radio station reactions. Countries threatening to cancel performances. "This is bigger than you," someone said. Freddie's eyes hardened. "No, this is exactly about me." Another executive interjected. "If you simply clarify, walk it back, suggest you were misunderstood." Freddie shook his head. "I won't." The room stiffened. "Freddie," the first man warned, "your career is on the line." Freddie inhaled slowly. For a moment, the noise of the world outside seemed to vanish. He thought of the letters, of the faces in the crowd, of the night he finally felt free. "My life is on the line," he said quietly. The words landed with more weight than any contract. A pause. "We can protect you," one executive offered, "if you let us manage this." Freddie's mouth curved slightly. "Protect me from what?" They didn't answer. Freddie turned and walked out. Down the hallway, he passed framed gold records, posters of past tours, images of the legend he had built. He stopped, studying one photograph. Himself on stage, younger, fearless, unaware of the truth he would one day choose. He exhaled. Back in his hotel room, the phone rang nonstop. Freddie let it ring. He stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker to life, feeling the weight of choice settle in his chest. A knock. Brian entered quietly. "They're furious," Brian said. Freddie smiled faintly. "They're afraid." "So are you." Freddie nodded. "Yes." Brian stepped closer. "But you're not turning back." "No," Freddie replied. Later that night, Freddie met the man he loved in a quiet restaurant far from cameras. They sat in a corner booth, hands almost touching. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything," the man said softly. Freddie shook his head. "You're the reason I finally have something." The man's eyes filled. Freddie reached across the table and took his hand. "For the first time in my life," Freddie said, "I'm choosing love without apology." The man squeezed his fingers. The next morning, Freddie called a press conference. The room buzzed with tension. Microphones pointed toward him like questions waiting to strike. Freddie stepped forward. "I will not retract my words," he said calmly. "I will not pretend. I will not live in fear." A reporter shouted, "Are you prepared to lose fans?" Freddie answered without hesitation, "If the price of their support is my silence, then yes." Another asked, "Do you think this will ruin your legacy?" Freddie smiled. "I think it will tell the truth about it." The headlines exploded. Some condemned him, some praised him, some feared him. But Freddie did not retreat. He walked off the stage of the conference, knowing the war had only begun. That night he sat alone, replaying everything. He thought of the boy in the crowd who cried, the woman who said he saved her son, the thousands who finally felt seen. Then the doubts returned. Could he survive this? Would the world forgive him? Could love be stronger than legacy? As the city fell asleep, Freddie Mercury stood at the edge of the balcony, staring at the dark horizon. The decision was made. The consequences were coming. And tomorrow, the industry would show him exactly how high the cost of truth could be. The backlash came fast. It arrived in headlines and angry letters, in canceled contracts and closed doors. Radio stations pulled songs. Promoters hesitated. Some old allies went silent. The industry that had once celebrated Freddie Mercury's defiance now feared it. But the love came too, and it came louder. Every morning, Freddie's assistant placed stacks of letters on the table. The words inside were raw, urgent, alive. "I finally told my parents who I am. I thought I was alone until you spoke. You saved my life, Freddie." Freddie read every one. Some nights he cried. Some nights he laughed. Some nights he simply sat in silence, absorbing the reality of what he had unleashed. On stage, the transformation was visible. Freddie moved differently, sang differently, lived differently. He no longer chased approval. He invited connection. The crowd sensed it. At one show, a fan climbed a barrier holding a sign. "Because of you, I'm alive." Freddie saw it. His voice broke mid-song. Backstage afterward, he sat with a fan, a young woman shaking with emotion. She told him how she had been afraid, how his words gave her courage. Freddie held her hands. "You were brave long before I opened my mouth," he told her. Meanwhile, executives gathered again. "This is spiraling," one said. Another replied, "He's more powerful than before." They were both right. Freddie had lost money, but he had gained something no contract could guarantee: trust. Then the unexpected happened. A legendary broadcaster invited him for a live interview. No edits, no scripts. Freddie accepted. The studio was tense. Millions watched. "Why did you risk everything?" the host asked. Freddie leaned forward. "Because a life lived in hiding isn't success," he said. "It's survival." Silence filled the room. "And I was tired of surviving." The response was electric. Overnight, public opinion shifted. Younger fans poured in. Artists spoke up. Support became louder than the backlash. But the pressure inside Freddie grew heavier. He had changed the world. Now, he had to live with it. One evening, exhausted, he sat alone with the man he loved. "Are you happy?" the man asked gently. Freddie thought for a long time. "Yes," he said. "And terrified." They laughed quietly. Outside, the city glowed. Inside, Freddie Mercury felt more human than ever. But the hardest moment still waited ahead. Because in the middle of this storm of truth and consequence, Freddie would receive a message from someone whose opinion mattered more than any critic, any executive, any crowd. And what that person would say would shake him to his core. The message arrived just before midnight. Freddie Mercury was sitting alone in his hotel room, the city glowing beyond the glass, his reflection faintly visible in the dark window. The phone buzzed on the table, breaking the quiet. He glanced at the screen and felt his chest tighten. The name belonged to his father. They had spoken rarely in recent years. Polite, careful, never deep, Freddie answered. "Hello." Silence greeted him at first, not empty, but heavy with everything unsaid. Freddie. His father's voice came finally, low and uncertain. I watched your interview. Freddie's throat tightened. Yes. Another pause. You were very brave. The word struck him harder than any headline ever had. I don't understand everything, his father continued. But I understand this. You are my son. Freddie closed his eyes, tears slipping free. I love you, his father said. Freddie pressed his hand to his mouth, emotion flooding through him. I love you, too. They spoke for a long time that night. About fear, about mistakes, about what it meant to finally speak the truth. They did not fix everything, but they opened the door. After the call ended, Freddie stood at the window, breathing deeply, feeling something inside him loosen that had been tight his entire life. The final piece fell into place. The next show arrived. The stadium was sold out. As Freddie stepped on stage, the roar of the crowd rose like a wave. He walked to the microphone and paused. I want to tell you something, he said. The crowd fell silent. Fear makes us small, Freddie said. Love makes us infinite. The audience erupted. He sang that night with fire that felt limitless. Not for applause, for a presence, for the thousands of people standing there feeling seen. Backstage, the man he loved waited. Freddie wrapped him in a quiet embrace. This is our life now, Freddie said. Yes, the man replied, and it's beautiful. Years later, people would speak of that night as the moment Freddie Mercury became more than a legend. He became a lighthouse. Not perfect, not fearless, but honest. The backlash faded. The love endured. And Freddie never hit again. He stood in the world as he was flawed, brilliant, human. Because when he chose love over fear, he didn't just change his life. He changed the lives of everyone who had ever been afraid to be themselves. And that was the greatest performance Freddie Mercury ever gave. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who loves Freddie Mercury. If this story inspired you, remember, even legends face battles unknown to the world. Subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves Freddie Mercury. This is the story of the night Freddie Mercury stopped being only a legend and became something far greater, a mirror for millions of souls who were afraid to exist as themselves. It began under blinding stage lights, with a man who had spent his entire life commanding the world with sound, spectacle, and fearless confidence. Freddie Mercury stood before a stadium of thousands, the crowd roaring in worship, when something inside him refused to keep performing. The applause, for once, could not silence the truth pressing against his chest. And so, he did the unthinkable. He spoke, not as an icon, not as a performer, but as a man, with his voice trembling and his heart exposed beneath the lights. Freddie confessed a truth he had hidden for years. I love a man. For a moment, the world stopped. Then the crowd erupted, not with anger, but with tears, with screams of support, with hands raised in gratitude. In that instant, Freddie understood that honesty does not destroy connection. It creates it. But freedom is never without consequence. Behind the curtain, the storm began. Executives panicked. Contracts were questioned. Radio stations pulled his music. Doors that once stood open quietly closed. They asked him to retract his words, to soften them, to survive the moment by betraying himself. Freddie refused. He chose truth over safety, love over fear, life over survival. As the backlash grew louder, so did the letters, hundreds, then thousands, from people whose lives had been waiting for that moment. Young men, young women, parents, children, strangers who had never before felt seen. Because of you, I told my parents the truth. I thought I was alone until you spoke. You saved my life. Freddie read every word, and slowly, the man who once needed the world's approval became someone who no longer required it. On stage, he transformed. His voice carried something deeper than power. It carried permission. Fans did not just watch him anymore. They recognized themselves inside him. He became a lighthouse, not because he was fearless, but because he was honest. The pressure reached its peak in a closed boardroom where men in suits warned him that his career was at risk. They showed him numbers, threats, futures built on silence. Freddie listened. Then he stood up and walked out. Later, sitting alone in a hotel room, the doubt finally crept in. Could he survive this? Would the world forgive him? Could love truly outweigh legacy? That night, the man he loved sat across from him and whispered the truth Freddie needed to hear. You are the reason I finally believe in myself. And in that quiet moment, Freddie realized he had already won. The storm outside continued, but inside him, peace began to grow. Then came the message that shattered him completely. A phone call from his father. They had lived years inside emotional distance, protected by politeness and silence. But on that night, his father spoke words Freddie had waited his entire life to hear. I don't understand everything, but I understand this. You are my son, and I love you. Freddie wept, not as a star, as a child who finally felt safe. When he stepped onto the stage for the next show, he was no longer carrying fear. He was carrying truth, and the crowd felt it. When he spoke into the microphone that night, his words rippled far beyond music. Fear makes us small. Love makes us infinite. From that moment on, Freddie Mercury never hid again. He lived openly, loved openly, stood in the world as he was, flawed, brilliant, human. The backlash eventually faded. The love endured. The lives he touched never forgot. Years later, people would speak of his voice, his genius, his costumes, his legacy. But those who truly understood would remember something else. The night Freddie Mercury chose honesty when silence would have been easier. The night he taught millions that survival is not enough. We are meant to live. The night he proved that the bravest performance is not on a stage, but in the heart. And that is why this story matters. Because when Freddie chose love over fear, he didn't just change his life. He gave the world permission to become itself.